A deep, thick smoke fills the room, impeding sight to a few feet as 5 men sit around a circular table in a back room playing poker. Aside from the cards and chips, the table is lined with glasses of whiskey and beer, and crystal ashtrays with the bottoms not visible. Along the wall, perpendicular to the door, sits another man, watching, drinking, and smoking, caught up in the drama as he leans forward on his stool with hand resting on the bar to keep his balance. The men at the table share quick glances at each other, their faces strewn with excitement, regret, frustration, and amusement. Barry Munson peeks at his cards, a 2 of hearts and a 6 of spades. Then to the flop, revealing a queen of diamonds, 5 of spades, and a 7 of clubs. He grips his half-smoked Dominican cigar with 3 fingers and takes a long drag, exhaling a cloud of smoke that encompasses most of the table. With a smirk, he raises. Gathering their thoughts and cards, the others take a moment, hesitant, but fold their hands. Barry takes possession of the pot, cheerful, becoming the new chip leader, and snickers. I would like to thank you all for your donations to my new boat. The room erupts with laughter as the maitre d' rushes in, out of breath, the smoke swirling in the entryway, though the 6 men pay them no attention. Breaking through the hazy room, the maitre d' stops as they arrive at the table, with the men noticing as the laughter ceases. The maitre d' stands motionless, unsure as what to say, the eyes around the room impatient. Mr. Munson, I hate to bother you, sir, but your wife is on the phone looking for you. Barry rolls his eyes and stares down the maitre d' as a few of the men chuckle, their disdain a joke to them. He brushes the attendant off, wishing for them to leave with a message, that he will speak with her in the morning. And without another thought, he grabs the cards and shuffles the deck. Their gazes lock as he passes the cards around, both remaining still, sharing in the exchange, before Barry lifts himself up with a huff and saunters over, draping his arm around the servant, placing his hand on their shoulder. I'd really not want to say this again, Barry snarls. But you can get back on the phone, and you can tell my wife that I am busy, and this conversation she wants to have will wait till the morning. Sir, the maitre d' hesitates, with a shaky voice before leaning in, closer, his breath warm on Barry's ear, and whispers, It's about your son. The maitre d' steps back, leaving Barry to fill the space alone, stunned, with a look of disbelief and repulsion. The impatience of the men is now directed at Barry, the atmosphere turning thick with indignation as the silence continues. Collecting his thoughts, Barry turns to the table and expresses his regret and stamps his cigar out, as a few of the men convince him to stay, that they're in the middle of celebrations, yet he persists that he must take the call. With a wave of disapproval and jeers, Barry grabs his jacket, turns to the maitre d', and makes their way out of the room. Patrons from all ethnicities and differing walks of life line the walls and huddle together on the floor of the bar as they dance, laugh, and get tipsy. The band skips about on stage, their instruments blaring a free jazz rendition of a popular song as sweat pours down their faces, a detail Barry notices from the opposite side. As if on cue, ready for him, the music shifts to a melancholic section, and the chatter lowers, replacing the activity with somber reflections. The silence is eerie. He can feel the eyes of everyone he passes burning into the back of his head as if they know about his son. Or is it all a sick joke his wife had come up with? If it were a joke, he doesn't find a shred of merriment from the idea. A lifetime flashes away as he reaches the office, with the maitre d' swinging open the door, revealing a cramped room with space for only a chair, a table, a lamp, a large stack of papers, a few pens, sticky notes, and a black rotary phone, which is off the hook. Barry is left with himself as the door closes behind him, sealing off any way to end the nightmare. He grips the phone and brings it up to his ear, cautious, fearing what he might hear, though is met with confusion as he shouts into the void to have no reply. Again, he calls out to his wife to get silence and groans with irritation before pulling the receiver off from his ear, and just as he is about to hang up, the muffled sobs of his wife escape. Through painful tears and exaggerated breaths, she calms enough and explains that their son, Michael, is dead. The silence comes from Barry now, wrangling his thoughts around the ordeal. He couldn't be dead, he thinks to himself. He's just gotten himself into trouble is all. In a deep, strained voice fighting emotions, Barry assures his wife that Michael is not dead in an attempt to console as her sobs return, along with Barry's vexation. The sound of movement comes from the phone as his wife leaves the room to retrieve the address to the morgue his body is at. She recites it, Barry cutting her off as he stumbles for a pen and paper before allowing her to continue and writing it down with trembling hands. He stares at the address with bewilderment, as it is in town, the place Michael left years ago and vowed never to return. Sure of himself, and in a bid to comfort only him, he swears to his wife that this is a misunderstanding and that he'll sort it out. "I don't want your lies," she howls, soft and incomplete. A heavy knot forms in his stomach as he hangs up the phone, choking up and pushing back the tears. People can't see him in this state. With a deep, meditative breath, he leaves the office and travels through the crowd again, the noise deafening as they screech in celebration. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! Barry sits in the car, formulating any idea of what is happening, as a flush of emotions and nerves he has never felt before courses through his body, and he tries to calm himself. The icy roads alone are enough to put anyone on edge. He reaches across the dashboard and pushes in the lighter before removing a pack of cigarettes from his jacket, struggling to pull one out. Frustration rising, he grips one between his lips and chucks the pack onto the passenger seat and lets an excessive breath out as the limp, droopy cigarette dangles from his mouth. The lighter pops out. With shaky hands, he pulls it and attempts to light his cigarette, dropping it onto the floor and crouching down to salvage the burning metal, taking his eyes off the road and, unbeknownst to him, veering into the opposite lane. Taking possession, he returns his gaze to the road and comes face to face with a large pickup truck before jerking the steering wheel, sending the car spinning on the ice. Dropping the lighter on the floor again, he slams on the brakes and yanks the emergency brake, and as the tires gain traction, the car comes to a sudden stop in the middle of the road. The windows fog with Barry's heavy breathing as his knuckles turn white from gripping the wheel, and he scans the area. There is no one in sight. He glances towards the pedals at the lighter, the coils back to their dark gray, no longer heated to light his cigarette. Picking it up, he places it back in the outlet and chuckles as he remembers the lighter in the glove compartment and opens it, finding one behind a bottle of eye drops. Lighting the cigarette, he takes a long drag, and following a slow, exhaustive breath out, he takes his foot off the brakes and continues driving, feeling better. The burned tire tracks behind him in the rearview mirror allows his mind to wander about his existence and what life is before his eyes well in remembrance. Michael was 16 the last time Barry would see him, a happy, normal teenager, the top track runner in the school, bringing home many medals, but never proving himself in any other way, which upset Barry. He had a girlfriend, Stacy, though after breaking up, Michael seemed unfazed by it, as if it meant nothing. There was no interest on his part for mechanics or regular sports, as Barry would put it, and his academics got him by. Typical teenage behavior aside, Michael's parents had no reason to call him anything but a perfect child. Barry's in the kitchen, hunched over the counter, making himself a sandwich. Ham, cheese, mustard, mayo, lettuce, and a thin slice of tomato. Licking the knife with the remnants of the condiments, Barry tosses the now empty jar of mayo into the bin underneath the sink to find it full, a chore Michael was supposed to have done. Frustrated, he shouts for Michael to come downstairs, yet there is no reply, sending Barry into further anger, yelling again and again, louder and louder. The silence returns and is broken with a huff as Barry storms the stairs to enter Michael's room, to find him gone. The room is a mess. Annoyed more about the state of his son's room, Barry decides to tidy it up, knowing full well Michael is unlikely to touch most of it, if any at all, for some time. Piling the clothes into one large pile beside the door, Barry continues picking up the garbage, the sounds of his feet scraping the floor, the rustling of papers, and occasional scoffs filling the space. He makes his way to the bed, and something catches his eye, the corner of a magazine. Yet Barry cannot tell what it is, so he kneels down to grab it, and as he pulls it out, he gasps in horror as he views the contents. Flipping through the pages, he becomes enraged and disgusted with picture after picture of naked men. Barry sits in the living room, anticipating Michael's return home any moment, with his wife pleading for him to come to bed, but he refuses. "I have to do this," he convinces himself. The exact events that transpire that evening have become muddled in Barry's mind, but after a long, loud, and violent confrontation between the two, Michael packs his suitcase of his things and hurries to the door. He takes one last look back. His mother sits, silently sobbing on the stairs, clutching the railing, and a tear runs down his face before his gaze is directed towards his father, standing beside his chair, veins popping from his neck in heat. Michael pivots on his heels, and a red locket falls from his pocket. He kneels to pick it up at a leisurely pace, before snapping back and exiting, the door slamming behind him, leaving his parents in the darkened house as his mother's wails intensify. Pulling up to the morgue, Barry parks the car, the only one in the lot, and sits, his eyes fixated on the front door, not wanting to enter. "I'm going to go in there, explain how this is all a misunderstanding, and leave. Then I'll go home and we'll have a laugh about this whole thing." He checks himself in the mirror and reaches into the glove compartment for the bottle of eye drops upon noticing his red eyes. Leaning his head back, he administers the drops, reassesses, takes a deep breath, and exits the car. The clack of his shoes on the concrete floors echo through the long hallway and off the white, vacant walls, alerting Jared, seated by himself on an uncomfortable chair at the back. As Barry inches closer to where his son lies, Jared stands up and turns to face him, sorrow filling his eyes as they begin to well. Barry stops a few feet away, his face red with sadness and humiliation. Michael had called his mother a year prior, letting her know that he is all right and that he met someone, Jared. And to Barry, he looked all right to him, but the thought shifts to contempt as a reflex. The door to the examination room bursts open as Jared opens his mouth to speak, and the two men snap their heads to the doorway where the coroner stands, his hair wild and apron lined with fresh blood. "I thought I heard someone coming down the hall," the coroner says, an attempt to lighten the mood, though can feel the tension, and turns to Barry asking if he's the deceased's father. The examination room is bright, clean, and pale, with not much occupying its space, but a counter in the back with a small sink, a stack of papers towered in a chaotic organizational pattern, with a half-eaten sandwich and a can of pop beside that. In the middle lies a solid metal table with a covered body resting on top. Barry remains motionless. He fumbles for his pack of cigarettes in his jacket, but can't find them. The coroner pays no mind to Barry, with his shallow breathing, as he rummages through the papers. "No need to worry, sir," the coroner chuckles. "This blood is from a raccoon I found behind the building." Turning around, he finds Barry, struggling to make sense of it all, and walks over, placing his hand on his back, guiding him towards the body. Hovering, Barry stares, his eyes drying out as he refuses to blink. Gripping the sheet draped over the body, the coroner pulls it off, revealing Michael's sunken, pale face. And as his emotions get the better of him, Barry lets go a strained groan as he comes to face his departed son in shock and disbelief. The face of a carefree athlete, the modest and cheery student, the overzealous and curious child, is gone, replaced with the double, frail and limp. This is his son, but it is a stranger who stares back at him. It was pneumonia, the coroner states, in case you were wondering. A wallet, a small red locket, and the clothes on his back were all he entered the hospital with, the coroner tells Barry, as he saunters to the counter to grab paperwork. Barry's face brightens as he hears of the locket. His grandfather's, bought during World War I, and has been in the family ever since. He forgot Michael had it. Opening a cupboard above the sink, the coroner grabs the locket, walks over to Barry, and hands it to him, though Barry is still. His eyes remain stuck between the floor and the body. Taking hold of his hand, the coroner forces the locket into Barry's palm before wrapping his fingers tight around it. He makes his way back to the counter to continue the paperwork, asking what he wants done, and after a few moments to collect his thoughts, Barry replies to throw the remaining items out and to cremate the body, that he and his wife will return in 2 days to collect the remains. The coroner returns to the spot Barry has not left and has him sign the document, his writing slow and sloppy. "My deepest condolences," the coroner recites, "to the both of you. I know this is a hard time and a terrible way to start the decade, though maybe the 90s will be kind." Without another moment's thought, Barry pivots on his heels and heads to the door, a breeze of tobacco and sweat caressing the coroner as he stands by. Jared hops up from his seat as the door swings open, the pair exchanging a quick glance before Barry storms off, the clack of his shoes returning to fill the space. "I'm sorry, sir," Jared bellows through strained breaths, yet Barry continues as if nothing was said. "You wanted to come back, and I hesitated. But we came. It was a month ago." Barry stops in his tracks, his anxiety building along with remorse, and opens the locket to find a picture on either side. One of himself and his wife, and another with Michael and Jared. I have it too. What Michael had. It won't be long before I go soon myself." Barry closes the locket and turns around to face Jared, their eyes meeting for the first time, sharing the moment and emotions. The compassion strengthens as the moment lingers, and Barry lets go a tear, a sign of pain and trust that he extends to Jared, the distance growing smaller. With a deep breath, Barry asks for Jared to come with him, that his wife will be waiting with coffee.